we set up our own label, and we didn't wait for somebody to come along and do it. And I think that's the thing that I would say, that to try and be really proactive and start and just do it. And then people go, oh, that's really good what you're doing. It's good you're doing something. And then they kind of are impressed by that. And then you just build, and you just gather things that you've done, and then you just keep going with it.
Welcome to the Female Entrepreneur Musician Podcast with Bree Noble. Bree is a musician, entrepreneur, speaker, and founder of Women of Substance Music Radio and Podcast. Bree's interviews with successful female musicians and industry pros are both inspirational and informational. She also answers your questions about the music business. Bree is on a mission to help you create great music, connect with your fans, and grow your business, and to truly become a female entrepreneur musician.
Hey, this is Bree Noble, and you are tuned into the Female Entrepreneur Musician Podcast, where we talk about making great music, connecting with your audience, and growing your business. And on today's episode, I interview Rachel Hollweg from London. And there are several things I loved about interviewing her. First of all, I love her story where she talks about how she had a certain idea of what success as an artist would be like. And she had it kind of all playing like a movie in her head about how it was going to happen. And it didn't work out that way. And she didn't let that deter her. She kept going, and she's built a fantastic career over the years. She also talks about how she balances family and work, and how she involves her young daughter, and how she didn't let that stop her when her daughter was really young. She still was able to figure out how to perform. I know that many of you have reached out to me and said that you are just really stuck on how to keep performing or how to tour when you have young children. So I think that this will be very helpful for you, because Rachel Hollweg did deal with the struggles of being a mom of a young child, and she kept going. And now she gets to enjoy having her 13-year-old daughter participate some in her shows. So I'll give you a little bit of background on Rachel in a minute, but first I want to introduce you to our sponsor for this episode. This episode of The Female Entrepreneur Musician is brought to you in part by Muddy Paw PR. Through their highly personalized public relations campaigns for DIY artists, they've secured placements on Alternative Press, Substream, New Noise, and more, with their artists going on to play festivals like Warped Tour, So What, and gain licensing deals and regular rotation in stores like Starbucks and Hollister. Find out more at muddypawpr.com. Now here's a little bit about Rachel Hollweg. Since 2001, British singer-songwriter Rachel Hollweg has released 3 albums and toured in Europe, Australia, and America. She has supported rock legends and appeared on many BBC national radio shows. All this from her kitchen table in South London, and whilst hanging out with her 13-year-old daughter. Here is my interview with Rachel Hollweg. So that's a little bit about Rachel Hollweg. So Rachel, is there anything that is a little bit more like unique, interesting, quirky, more personal about you that's not in your bio that you think our listeners need to know?
Well, I don't know if they need to know this, but I live in the city. I was born in the city of London, but then when I was about 9, we moved to the countryside, to the middle of nowhere. And then after university, I came back here. So I think I'm really a country girl living in the city. And so I love nature, and I seek it out as much as I can in the city, and I grow vegetables in the city and flowers and things by the roadside even sometimes. So that's kind of my personality, I would say.
I love that you're trying to recreate that in the city. Do you have like a yard that actually allows you to do that in London?
I've got a little roof terrace where we live, and then I have a vegetable bed in a community garden. And I also did do some gardening literally by the side of the road with a group of women from my daughter's primary school. We set up this roadside bed, and so I just any opportunity.
I love that.
I'm not very good at it, but I really like it.
I love that. So tell us how you got started in music.
Well, as a child, I always played and sang. I played the violin, and I did some basic piano, and I used to play through chords, Beatles songs and so on, and worked out from that I could start writing songs when I was quite young. But then I didn't go and do music full time. I had a proper job for 5 years after university where I studied French and German. And then I finally went and studied music full time at the Guildhall School of Music. And that's where I met my husband, Andy Hamill, who's a session bass player. And really most of my colleagues come out of that connection of that time. And that's when I began to be a professional musician, when I was 28.
Mm. Yeah, I noticed that you've done a lot with Jeb Loy Nichols, who I was actually familiar with. Did you meet him at the university?
That's great that you know him. I didn't meet him there. I met him because Andy was in a band with him for a while. And he came home one day and said, I've met this guy, I think you'd really like him. And we met and we've just done lots of different collaborations. He's even done artwork for me because he's an artist as well. And he's become a really important colleague and collaborator.
That's awesome. So after you left university, did you go straight into, kind of performing and being a musician full time?
I did. I had a few other jobs for a while. Was doing some kind of temping, if you call that same thing, kind of being a receptionist and things, just temporary things. And I did some translating. I did some German to English translating. And then I just thought, I've just got to go for this. And then the first jobs I had were kind of bread and butter type music jobs, singing in restaurants and hotel lobbies, big posh hotels, singing lots of jazz, actually, because I'd studied jazz. So then I did start to make money from that straight away, because you can make more money from playing jazz in London anyway than you can from doing original music.
Interesting. So I didn't know jazz was a big thing in London, and that a lot of people, a lot of hotels and things had that in their lobbies.
Yeah, they do. They mostly have a piano, and they do have music ongoingly at various different points during the week and in dining rooms. And I don't do that nowadays, but I have the impression that it still continues, and it's people who've either done it for years or it's a new generation of people who are doing it.
Well, it's nice that there are those jobs that can help people like you were when you were getting started, actually make money from music and do what they love. And then you can expand into the singer-songwriter career like you did.
Exactly. No, it is good. It is a good thing. And it was just really when friends started saying, oh, you should put in some of your own songs. And then people gave me feedback that they liked. When I started to do more jazz clubs, I was doing jazz standard material and classic songs by other people, and James Taylor and Carole King and all of those wonderful things. And then I started dropping in a few of my own things, and people said, oh, we really like those. So then the balance shifted. But I still do some songs by other people. And in fact, I've just recorded a whole load of stuff by other people, which I'm going to release on iTunes during the year.
Ooh, that's exciting. I love unique versions of covers. For years, I had a show on my radio station that was called We've Got It Covered. And it was like this covers, unique versions of covers from all kinds of genres and eras.
Brilliant. That's such a great idea. I mean, it's so interesting, isn't it? How a song can sound so different.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. There's so many songs. I was just like, I can't even believe this is the same song. And I love this version just as much as the other one, if not more, but it's a completely different animal, when someone else redoes it.
Yeah. And it's, if it's a song done by a man and then it's done by a woman, it's very different, and the other way around.
Absolutely. So at this point, do you consider yourself a full-time musician, or are you, doing some other things, maybe whether it's related to music or not, other kind of side jobs besides your singer-songwriter main role?
I am doing these days, I have 3 days a week when I do teaching. I do teaching singing. It's all 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 singing, and beginner violin, piano and guitar. So I do that in a couple of schools, and because I have a 13-year-old daughter, it just works out really well. But I'm home when she's home, and I leave after she's left, and it's just really works out well for me. And I've been doing that for a few years, just a handful of years now.
That's awesome. And so how much time do you think you spend on the actual, writing songs, performing and stuff for your own music?
It varies so much. I get little clusters of things, or I might go away for a few days and do some gigs somewhere, maybe in another country, or it really, really varies. It's impossible to say. And I have to say that writing I do sporadically in a kind of burst, and then I go for a long time without writing anything, unless someone's kind of asked me to write some lyrics or work on something with their project. So I have a burst of stuff, and then I kind of do an album, or I gradually, slowly gather it. But I'm not one of these people, sadly. I mean, Jeb Lloyd-Nichols is very prolific. I'm not like him. I wish I were.
I think we probably all wish that, but life gets in the way sometimes, right?
It's true. It certainly does.
So we have a lot of listeners that are kind of that, beginner stage, struggling musicians. And I'd love to hear a story from you of a time where you felt like, oh my gosh, like this isn't working. I feel like I'm hitting a wall. Maybe I should just give up. And then why you decided to push through that, and what happened as a result of that.
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I had a lot of different ideas, but the thing that I think I would like to say to people is that is this, that when it was in the year 2000, I think, and just before that, I was kind of doing rounds of record company meetings, and I was managing to get some meetings, often just by, in those days, ringing up and just saying, I think that you might be interested in what I'm doing, and just kind of brazening it out. And I had some meetings which were very frustrating, because I had a meeting with Joni Mitchell's record company in this country, and they said, oh, it's interesting what you've got, but it turned out that the person really couldn't do anything to help me, and kind of let me think they could for a while. And so it was very frustrating. But during that time as well, through a family friend, I got an introduction to a very nice family-run publishing company, and I did have a publishing deal with them for just under a year. But during that time, we were waiting for something to happen, for someone to come along and say, great, we want to give you a record deal. We want to cover one of the songs. And that was the aim of the publishing deal. And everyone was so incredibly nice and supportive, but it just wasn't happening. And I think we had this kind of moment when in 2000, we went to New York actually for a kind of holiday and go and see lots of gigs. And we also went to have a meeting with the lawyer of the publishing company. And his car had been stolen. And in the car was my demo CD that I'd made. So he said, he was quite upset because his car had just been stolen. He said, I haven't been able to listen to your music because this car got stolen. And anyway, there's no record deal for anyone these days. It's all bubblegum music. And even people like Roberta Flack can't get a record deal. And we were in this incredible, I think it was Fifth Avenue, in this amazing office block. And we thought, we're going to have this big meeting. And it was just so negative, the whole thing. And we spent the rest of the week going to see gigs and meeting amazing musicians, some of whom became really good friends of ours. And we just thought, let's just do this ourselves. And it was quite a lot to do with my husband, who had played on so many other people's records. He just said, look, we've got something good and I think we should just do it. So we left at the end of the publishing deal, which was quite a short deal anyway. I could have stayed. I could still be waiting for a record company to find me. But we just set up our own little cottage industry in London. We set up our own label, and we didn't wait for somebody to come along and do it. And I think that's the thing that I would say, that to try and be really proactive and start and just do it. And then people go, oh, that's really good what you're doing. It's good you're doing something. And then they kind of are impressed by that. And then you just build, and you just gather things that you've done, and then you just keep going with it. And that's what I would say, just to not wait for someone else to come and do it for you.
Yeah, that's exactly why I wanted to have you on this show. Because when you told me, what you'd done and what you'd been doing, I'm like, that is the kind of artist I want to inspire. People that aren't going to sit around and wait. People that are willing to build this from the grassroots and take a chance. And it's true, like so many artists just waste so much time waiting around for somebody to swoop in and give them that deal. And it's true, like nowadays. So what year was this when you had that meeting?
I think it was in 2000. And then in 2001, we released the first album. But we had quite a lot of recordings because we already had these demo recordings. And then we just we did sort of take some of that material, I think some of the recording material, and then revocal it, and then we did some new arrangements. And so it was, we sort of we'd all kind of nearly done it, but it wasn't. So that still exists as the first CD that I did. And then we did a proper release. We got a distribution deal with a really nice company that I was with for 15 years that only distributes physical CDs, not digital. So they distributed my 3 albums, and that was a really nice relationship. The publishing company was also a really nice relationship, but I just thought that I would waste my life just waiting in case something happened.
Yeah, you probably would have. So I'm glad you didn't. Then I wouldn't have your music to play on my show in a couple, or actually it'll be in the past once we release this interview. But I mean, just fantastic music that needed to get out into the world. And it's funny because that happened in 2000. And when you think about now, it's 2018, and there are definitely not many record deals to be had. And they were already saying that back in 2000. So I'm glad that you saw the writing on the wall, even as it was happening, moving into the digital age.
It was the beginning of that time, wasn't it? It was the beginning of people starting to do their own thing. And I think I had an advantage in being married to a session musician who had played on lots of people's records. He'd played on a lot of records of people who were the next big thing for the big record companies. And then they had got dropped. They had the big record company party which I had gone to in a couple of cases and thought, they're only listening to the first song, and now they've started chatting amongst themselves. And then actually some of these people just got dropped. So they had all the touring support and everything for the big launch, and then they just were dropped. So
man, that would just be so devastating.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. So, since 2000, and since you started just really building your career, and you've done a lot, you've performed a lot of places, what over this time has been the most mind-blowing thing that's happened to you that you've thought like, wow, pinch me, like, how can I really be here? Is this really happening?
Yeah. Well, that's also a great question. I would say 3 things. The first thing that comes to mind to me is that I'm a really big radio fan, and people who've spent time here will know that we're really lucky with our BBC radio stations, and BBC Radio 4 and Radio 2 stations that I listen to a lot. There are some really long running programs which are kind of talk shows where they have a bit of music as well. And so when I actually went on those shows that I'd listened to through my growing up, I was just so excited. I just, I really couldn't believe my luck. And when I go to do anything at the BBC, I get a huge thrill because there's some really fantastic people that work there, and it's a very nice environment. And so that's I think doing live sessions and interviews live on BBC National Radio, that's been fantastic. And the other thing, which is similar but in a kind of playing situation, is I did some touring supporting Roger McGuinn of the Byrds, which came through a promoter who I really persistently managed to get in touch with. And I did that 2 years in a row, and he was just solo. And at one point we were sharing, it sounds really weird, we were sharing a dressing room that was only divided by a curtain because it was in a really quaint kind of old building. And he was there practicing all of his guitar intros to things like Turn, Turn, Turn and Tambourine Man. And I was on the other side putting on my mascara. And I just thought, wow, this is amazing. The Byrds and Roger McGuinn, that was a real highlight to do that touring with him. I think, and ongoingly, I'm very, very lucky to work with incredible musicians. And they are all jazz players who then can turn their hand to any kind of music. And every time I'm playing with my band, I just think, I can't believe it. I feel like I'm a female James Taylor. I just feel like it doesn't get better than this. So all of those things, really, I feel very lucky to have done those things.
I love that you mentioned something in a lot of different areas. That's really awesome. And I have to say, I was reading your bio and I was like, what? She played with Paul Carrack. Did you tour with him?
Yeah, Carrack. I did a very similar.
I love Paul Carrack.
He is amazing, and he's a really nice man too, as is Roger McGuinn. And I was just touring solo doing these gigs. So it's kind of quite lonely, but everybody was very nice to me. And that was a very different kind of crowd and a very different experience, but just a brilliant experience.
How fun. So, during this time that you've been doing all this touring, you had a daughter. Obviously, you said you have a 13-year-old daughter, and I was noticing that because mine just turned 15 like the other day. So
Right.
she was born in 2003, and I was like, yeah, I can totally get
Yeah.
the trajectory of what that's like for you. And how do you balance that? Like, how do you balance the touring? And did you used to take her with you and that kind of thing when she was younger?
I did. I mean, in very first gigs, you just have to have someone in the audience to kind of hold her. I remember another singer-songwriter friend of mine came along, and I remember seeing her balancing her on her knee and then kind of sort of wiggling her up and down to entertain her while I was playing. And that felt so amazing to have her there. Then it went into the next phase, which you maybe also have experienced, which is somebody shouting, "Mummy, mummy, stop singing," and kind of coming onto the stage and grabbing your leg.
Oh my gosh.
Not so good. And then she had to be sort of taken away with ice creams by my brother. I remember that time. And then my mother-in-law was really fantastic. So I remember ringing her one time. She rang and said, "How's it going?" And I said that I couldn't manage to do this gig because it'd be involved being away for too many hours. And she said, "Ring them back and say you can do it, and we'll make it work." And I'm forever grateful to her for that. And then she would also come and do babysitting. My mom as well, who sadly can't really do that nowadays, but my mother-in-law and my mom. And then for things that were nearby, I had a succession of babysitters who, at that time, there were lots of people coming from Eastern Europe to work in London. They were very highly qualified young women, but they were all working as nannies. And I met them through the local playgroup. And so I just had a whole stack on my phone, which started off babysitter and then their name. So I just put in B for babysitter, and they all came up. And then I would just text my way through them saying, "I've got this gig, are you free?" And that's how I did it. But funnily enough, I don't know what you find, but when my daughter was very young, it was kind of easy because she was sort of asleep at night. But now she's older, I feel like I need to be around more. So I feel like I'm more, unless I go away to do some gigs, it's now we have teenagers who come and babysit, and then it's quite cool for her to hang out with these nice older teenagers. But so it's just changed as time's gone on, how I've managed it. But
yeah, and I think it's different for you because your husband probably often plays with you, whereas for me, like, I could leave my daughter home with my husband if I needed to. But in the early days, I brought her on tour with me, and I would bring my mom with me to watch her and kind of just be tour support.
That's great. Yes. Well, I never did that. I've never done that, but we've either gone over the last few years since our daughter's been older, we've gone on some amazing trips abroad in France and in Greece particularly. And she's hung out while we've done the concerts. I think that is getting quite boring for her now. But she has also played on some of our gigs at Glastonbury Festival. She played the violin on a tune, and she did that in France as well. And sometimes she's really enjoyed that. Other times she doesn't want to do that, and that's completely fair enough. But yeah, it's changed. And I think the main thing was that that conversation with my mother-in-law, I think, was a turning point where she just, said, "We'll work it out." And I decided from that point that if there was something I wanted to do and I could, I would do it. Otherwise I would just say no to everything.
Right. I know it's so hard to know, like, are you going to be able to make this work out in the background? So that's good that you could have that fallback plan.
Yeah. And
so
the attitude of mind. I think the attitude of mind that you think, I either give up doing this or I just say I'm going to find a way to work it out on an every single base. Every single situation is different. And I just think, what do I need to do in this situation? And then just do that.
So what are your favorite gigs to book? I know you play a lot of festivals, you play a lot of different kinds of venues. What are your favorite kinds of gigs?
Well, I think the favorite ones are the ones that I've played for quite a long time, where it's kind of a repeat booking and there's not the stress of trying to understand the booking person, or which can be sometimes difficult, as people will know. And so you've built up a relationship sometimes over many, many years with that venue owner or manager, and it's just a pleasure to deal with them. And then you feel relaxed when you go to do the gig. So the jazz club in London called the 606, and then there's a really lovely acoustic venue here called the Green Note, and which is owned by women, and I love dealing with them. and also the 606 Steve Ruby. He's run the club for 40 years. And it's just, there's an ease of dealing with the people once you know them.
And do you do your own bookings?
I do, yes. When I did the support tours for Roger McGuinn and Paul Carrick and a few other people through that promoter, that was great because you just got the sheet through. And it's like, this is a tour. And that was lovely. But otherwise, I do everything myself.
So I noticed that you play a lot of really cool looking festivals. And I was just curious, like, do you have any secret sauce for getting in with these festivals?
I think that I don't, unfortunately. And what has happened, all the festivals that I've done have just been through following up a personal connection of some kind, whether it is somebody who's a lighting engineer or actually the BBC presenter in the beginning. I was on the show of Janice Long, who's a really, really lovely BBC presenter here, said, "Oh, have you been spending," this was on air, live on air, "have you been spending the whole summer doing festivals?" And I said, "Well, actually, no, I've been sitting on windy beaches with my daughter." And then afterwards, I said I hadn't really broken into the festivals. And she immediately gave me connections with 2 festivals she was involved with. And then I did those festivals after quite a lot of persistence in one case, I have to say. Mm-hmm. But that was just an introduction. And I think that in my experience, it's been really difficult to cold call festivals. It's always been through having some connection, or maybe my husband's playing there and then I say I'm going to be there anyway, and is there a stage I can play? That sort of thing.
Yeah. And I think like once you get a few festivals under your belt and you can have those in your bio, it makes it easier too, right?
Exactly. I always think with everything, with booking gigs in general, it's like pressing the buttons. So you email or you call, which I do quite a lot these days because everyone's got so many emails. And you just, within your first sentence, you can just say, I've done this, this, and this. And then people will take you seriously. But till you get to that point, it's quite difficult. But you just need to start collecting those buttons that you can mention.
Yeah, absolutely. Credibility markers are so important when you're communicating with people that are like decision makers and stuff, because they don't want to waste their time on somebody that they don't know has actually done something that, makes them worthy of their time. So, I mean, unfortunately, I hate to say that, but it does tend to be true.
It's true. It's true. And I think the other thing that's really great is if you can collect some quotes from people who have some kind of influence, and press quotes and media, all of that. Then people go immediately, oh, they said that, that you must be good. It's a shame that people can't just even take a moment to listen to some music and then decide that they think it's good. I think people need their taste to be backed up by someone else saying they think it's good too. Sometimes.
I think that's true. And it's true that people are just so busy. I mean, I can identify with that too.
Yes.
Like, if someone sends me somebody for this show, I'm going to need to see a few things in that email that make me want to take the next step.
Yes.
Just because you get so many emails. So it makes complete sense. And it is just kind of part of the trappings of the business and the world that we're in, being so inundated. I mean, and part of that is because there's so much access now, like with email and things, like there's more access to things than you would normally get in the old days. But that comes with it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. And I think on that note, I have gone, when I just mentioned briefly that I quite often call people on the telephone. And I started out always sending people postcards, and then I even started making things out of folded tracing paper, which I'd like to do. And I used to sit and stuff huge 100 envelopes full of stuff that I would then send to the press and so on. And at one point, a few years ago, somebody who was on the receiving end of those, he became my Facebook friend. He's a journalist, and he said, "Oh, I remember your little tracing paper things that you sent." So if you can make it somehow personal as well, I think that really helps. And in this day when everybody's got so many emails, if you can kind of make a personal connection, I've gone back to that.
Yeah. It's kind of like we're coming full circle now in the days of the internet. And speaking of that, communicating with people online, how do you like to communicate with your fans and engage with your fans? Where do you find is the best place to, get new fans and engage with the ones that you have?
Well, I think I'm quite old-fashioned, and I'm not as brilliantly technical as you, and I'm learning stuff as I go. I do Facebook. My Facebook profile is open. I have a musician page, but I have another page which I mainly do, and it's not a private Facebook. So if people kind of come to shows in other countries, particularly, I've had people then get in touch with me on Facebook and keep in touch that way. I think a really nice thing and a very long lasting thing is to have your emailing list, which is your kind of gold dust, which you mustn't ever lose. And so I'm very old fashioned. I have a folder, and I've written down by hand all of the emailing lists, all emailing addresses of my people on my mailing list, just in case the whole
by hand. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, you should at least take a picture of that with your phone, just in case like a fire happens or something.
I know. Well, I mean, I do MailChimp, and but everyone, when I add them on, I also write them into my folder, which is on a shelf. And so it's kind of, some of those people have been on my mailing list since the whole thing was possible, and some of them have unsubscribed, but not that many. So I think I find a really nice personal way to maintain contact with people and telling them what you're doing. And the other thing that I'm trying to build up is a YouTube channel, which is a bit in fledgling stages. But I can see from other colleagues, particularly my friend and colleague Mean Mary, which is the reason that I spotted what you do, is because she followed it. She's had great success by doing videos, and I think that is a very good way forward.
Well, I love that you're focused on the email list, because I do think that that's so important. And I find that a lot of artists have a really big block when it comes to that, because they just want to do social media and they feel like the email list is somehow this like 100-pound gorilla that they can't tackle for some reason. But luckily, and I think you're like me in this way, like you started it a long time ago. And I started mine, way back in whatever it was, 2006, when I first came out with my album. And that was what you did back then, because there was no social media yet. And it's still a thing. And so you've built it all this time. Do you find that when you come out with a new album, that people that are on your email list are like ready and waiting to buy it?
Yeah, there are some people who are amazing, and they buy about 10 and give them to their friends. And I feel like, then I give them a free copy as well. Then there are other people who, then they'll go to the digital format. So on the website now we have everything that you can download everything from the website, and it's available in kind of high quality and just MP3s as well. So everything's there that people can buy in every different format. And then I did embrace Spotify fully this actually last year, because I was kind of holding back, thinking I'm going to leave it so that people can buy the music for a while after the new album. And then I thought, actually, this is just the way that everyone's doing it. So I've had to embrace that. But I do, if I send out an emailing letter, which I don't do that often, I do always get really nice responses and replies from lots of people. So I think it's having it and not overusing it maybe is a good idea.
Well, I always ask this question for pretty much everybody that comes on this show about streams of income, because I think that it's really important as a musician these days to have several different streams. And I know you've talked about doing teaching. What do you think? How do you think your streams of income break down as far as like money that comes in from live shows, sales, merch, any kind of maybe licensing that you get, and then like your teaching?
Yeah, well, at the moment, it is mainly teaching, because I'm kind of more home-based at the moment. And then when I do an album, it's changed a lot, because it used to be that you would sell a lot of physical copies, but it's not. With Spotify, it has made a huge difference to income from selling the music, which is a shame. I think something's got to shift on that basis somehow, and I hope it does. But so I would say at the moment the money from the recorded music is quite minimal. But then when you do a run of gigs, then you can sell quite a few CDs on gigs, and that really remains a place to sell the physical music. I think I sort of thought that I would sell more downloads than I do, and I don't sell very many downloads. It's mainly more physical CDs And then the gig fee. And because I'm married to a professional session musician, I have steered away from doing gigs that don't pay anything or very little, just if I possibly can help it, unless I think that something is really worthwhile and it's going to maybe lead on to other things, or I just want to do it. But I always try to get a decent gig fee as well. And I think that kind of makes people think of you in a different way as well. But
it does. And I think we need to think of ourselves in a different way. You know, once I had kids and it's like, again, like you have to get babysitters and your time away from your kids, like you have to value that. And I would just say to people, like, I don't go anywhere, even if it's down the street for less than $100.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was just a mindset shift, you know, and then they have to accept it. Like here are the reasons why, and it's take it or leave it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think because I started out in the London jazz scene, which is quite well paid, and the people they're like session players and jazz players, and so if you want to work with good people, they want to be paid properly. Otherwise, they'll have to say, "Look, I'm really sorry because another gig has come in."
Right.
Because they're so busy. Some of these people, including my husband, you know, he's kind of kicked himself off some of my gigs sometimes because he had a better offer, which is kind of annoying.
That's hilarious. I love it.
You know, he'll just, look, I'm really sorry, but I absolutely have to do that other thing. Sometimes I think, yes, that's fair enough. And other times I've been annoyed. But I think I've started with that mindset that you should get paid. And so, yeah, so I try to get, you know, in London, it's, you know, you can get, it varies so much from, you know, under £100 to £200. It just depends what you're doing so much. And then the singer-songwriter venues don't pay so well, but it's just trying to make it like a kind of patchwork quilt of your life work, really.
Yeah, that's the way I think about income streams, is like a patchwork quilt of all the things that you need to put together to build a life as a musician, which is why I always ask that question, because I think it's really interesting. As far as you building yourself, you know, from the beginning, and, you know, kind of having this learning curve of like, I don't have a record label or anyone behind me. Were there any resources that helped you along the way, whether they were books or online resources, you know, courses or anything that you took that helped you with the marketing side, the songwriting side, or even like kind of the self-development that you needed to have the mindset to be able to do that yourself, that you can recommend?
Well, there was a book that was called something like All You Need to Know About the Music Business.
Oh, yes. So many people mention that one.
A very big fat book. And I did read all of that, and I got very confused by lots of things. I can't even remember what they called, like recouping advances and all that sort of stuff. And then it became not very relevant to me. I think I remember there's a thing called BASCA here, the British Association of Songwriters, Composers and Authors, which is a very good organization. I was a member of that, and I went to a couple of seminars there, I remember. So wherever anyone is, there will be an organization like that will have music business type seminars. And I think from reading all of those things, when we decided to do it ourselves, we just thought, right, we're going to do it like the big boys do. We're going to set up a label. And then from that point, the collecting agencies, so the PRS in this country and the MCPS, are extremely helpful, and they will really give you loads of advice about everything you need to do. And things like, you know, you have to have I think it's called an IRSC, I always get the initials wrong, so that you can identify your tracks. So if they get played on the radio, then all money comes to you. And things like realizing that as a person who has a label and is the artist and is a songwriter, I have, you know, we all have 3 streams of income. We have it as a performer singer, we have it as a songwriter, the publishing, and we also have it as a record company holder. So when something gets played on the radio, I get paid 3 times. And just being aware of things like that. But all of those collecting agencies will help you, and they'll spend a lot of time with you. And I had a lot of calls where I've rung up and said, I just don't understand. Can you explain it to me again? And they're really, really nice. So I would say that has been very helpful. And just talking to other people who've done it, but trying to do things in the model of the industry, but just doing it exactly how you want to do it.
Yeah, I like that. Just modeling what other maybe labels or indie labels are doing, but you're doing it yourself.
Yeah.
And I do think that just having a resource of somebody that's a little bit further ahead than you are is always like a gold mine.
Yeah. And sometimes now people ring me up. I've maybe met some people that my husband's worked with, or met someone at a party, and they said, "Do you mind if I give you a call and just ask you how I need to do this?" And it's really nice to be able to pass that on as well.
Absolutely. Well, this has all been super helpful. Can you let our listeners know how they can find you online and connect with you?
Yes, I would love that. I've got a website, which is www.rebeccahollweg.com. And
you can spell that for them too, just in case they're listening.
So it's Rebecca, REBECCA, Hollweg, HOLLWEG.com. And there's nothing, no dot in between or anything. There's a button on there where you can join my mailing list. There's also a way to email directly through that. My Facebook is just Rebecca Hollweg, but it's a W, pronounced like a V. I'm on Twitter as well, although I don't do much on Twitter. So those are basically the ways that they can be in touch, and I would love to be in touch. It would be a thrill.
Perfect. And if you go to London, you got to go find her and see where she's playing, because I have heard her music and it's fantastic. So you guys should check her out live. Thank you so much, Rebecca. This has been really, really helpful. I love getting to see kind of your story of starting from nothing back in the days when you realized that you weren't going to get any kind of a record deal, and just saying, hey, we're going to do it ourselves. It's really inspiring to all the artists that are listening. So I really appreciate you taking us through that journey.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure for me. And it's great to think of other people in different countries across the pond, as we say, same journey. So good luck, everybody. Just keep going.
Now go out and make great music, connect with your fans, and grow your business. Female Entrepreneur Musician has been brought to you by FEM165.com and FemaleMusicianAcademy.com. With editing by Jen Eads of 317 Sound Design and music by Stella Ronson.